So I want to talk about the making of this film because, I mean, obviously, anytime that somebody is writing a book or making a film, there's a lot of production that goes into it ahead of time.
Yep.
Okay. From the time that we're seeing things publicly, the film's been already in production for a long time.
Right.
And so there's no way that the Asbury Revival started and you guys said, hey, let's make a quick film about this. God has been speaking to you guys for years about this film. Tell me about this story, what it means to you and your brother with, the Erwin brothers. You guys have done some amazing films like American Underdog, I Can Only Imagine. I mean, these films are great demonstrations of faith on the big screen and real stories, and they've done very, very well. But where did you guys say this story needs to be told on the big screen?
Well, I think, John, I think the thing that's exciting is this when it comes to something that's so much bigger than any of us, and an idea of revival and God's Spirit sweeping, our planet again in a fresh way. It's neat to see how it's been on the heart of so many people, whether it's the Asbury Revival or, our friend John Bevere just has a book coming out about revival that comes out next week, I believe. And so there's just so many kind of just this churning. But for us, it started about 10 years ago. We did a movie called Woodlawn, John and I did, and it was a true story. And it was a story that was set in the 1970s about a school that was hit by this spiritual awakening that was the Jesus movement. It was the tail of it. Hit this school that had a lot of racial tension from the last part of integration and led to the biggest high school football game in the history of the Southeast. And so we kind of told the story through that lens of this one school, kind of that small microcosm. And at the end of the movie, my brother John found this magazine from Time Magazine that on the cover it said the Jesus Revolution. And he traced back 3 years prior to that. And the cover of Time Magazine was an all black cover that just had the words, is God dead? Mm-hmm. And he just asked the question, what in the world happened in those 3 to 4 years between the two covers? And he started doing the research about what actually happened during the Jesus movement and the genesis and the kind of inception of what happened amongst these hippie kids that the church thought were completely unredeemable. And God brought this one hippie evangelist that came from Haight-Ashbury up in San Francisco, brought him down the coast, and he is a guy named Lonnie Frisbee that's played by Jonathan Rumi from The Chosen in our film. And then he met this old guard pastor, Chuck Smith, whose church was dying, and Chuck's played by Kelsey Grammer. And the two of those men just caught a vision from each other about reaching the hippie culture. And this revival swept the country. So when John found out the rest of that story, and then found out the story about a young Greg Laurie from Harvest Church, and him being one of the initial kids that was redeemed out of the movement, when he found out the rest of that story, he was like, we have to do this movie. And I was like, we had just finished American Underdog. I was toast. And I was like, John, I think we should wait a little bit and catch your breath. He's like, no, you don't understand. There's an urgency. We have to do it now. And I was like, John, if you feel like you need to do it now, go for it. I'll slide over to produce. You direct it. And we brought in a buddy of ours, Brent McCorkle, who's an incredible director, to direct it with him. And I produced it with the rest of the team. And just as he got done with it, and I saw, the pieces start and come back. I was like, everybody has to see this now. So I've been out on the road for the past 4 months, just beating the drum of this movie is important because it's super timely and it has something to say. So everybody needs to see it.
Yeah. I love how this movie is completely about Jesus.
Yep.
And it's completely evangelistic, but it doesn't ever feel like you're getting the cheesy gospel message that has been just, not that the gospel message is cheesy, but the way that it's been portrayed has often been that way.
Yeah.
The delivery is so casual and just real. And like, oh my gosh, like Jesus really does speak to hippies and squares all at the same time. Yep. And they need to work together. And I love how you had Lonnie Frisbee and Chuck Smith, like that conversation they had at the dinner table, at the dining room table, was something that you could just see the old guard break down, and guys, Kelsey Grammer is playing this. You can just see these walls of resistance fall down, and you were like, this is what needs to happen. And
it's conversation.
It's amazing. Conversation is amazing.
That conversation between these two Titan actors playing these two Titans of the movement it was just magic. And it starts with Kelsey Grammer as this kind of old guard pastor with a little bit of a get off my lawn kind of mentality. He just leans over to Lonnie and he says, tell me about your people. And he does it very sarcastically. And Lonnie just lets the guard down and says, my people are sheep without a shepherd. And he proceeds to say, to kind of explain that these aren't the bad kids. These are the kids that are looking for the right things, but in the wrong place. And they need Jesus. And that conversation is fascinating. And I think the thing that's interesting, as we've shown the film to a lot of different groups, is it's something that every Christian will see their soul and their history in. But for the people outside the church walls, it's so counterculture that these were the rejects. These were the outcasts. These were the people that the church said, there's no way that hippies can get saved. And in the midst of that, God starts doing this massive work. And so it's very countercultural and very overtly Christian. And so as we showed it to Lionsgate, our parent company that is distributing it, Lionsgate watched it, and our boss at Lionsgate, who's not a Christian, is not really a particular person of faith at all, he watched it and he said, don't change a thing. And he said, everything about this movie is exactly the kind of stories we want to tell. And he said, it's made a huge impact on me. I can't stop thinking about it. And so, it's been a really interesting thing that it's a great conversation starter with people that aren't Christians. And I think my encouragement is to the audience is, go to the movies this weekend and invite a lost friend, because of the amazing conversations that will come out of it, of people that don't know Jesus. It's going to be powerful.
Totally. I know part of that dining room conversation, they talked about everybody's on a quest to find God. Some people are going to drugs, and that's leaving them empty. But this line that stuck with me, it says, there's power in desperation.
Yes.
And that really describes a lot of what we're seeing today. Is our desperation is what God's really responding to with these revivals that are popping up in different places. It's desperation in people's hearts and lives. Yeah.
And he turns to Chuck right after that. And Lonnie asks, what would it take to make you desperate, Chuck?
Yeah.
And I think desperation is something that works both ways. I think for the hippies, the desperation came from the fact that they had tried everything that they were told was going to be what unlocked them to knowing God. LSD, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, free love, all these things that were going to be what unlocked the door of them understanding the eternal. And the bottom dropped out and it got ugly. And so they were just completely hopeless that their movement had died. And then in the midst of that, on the other side, the church was dying. The church had lost their voice into culture. They had lost their ability to connect with people, and it was a dying religion. And that created a desperation for people like Chuck. So these two men that are completely desperate for change kind of all of a sudden saw that the answer was, a really getting back to the pure essence of Christianity. And that's where the revival sparked. And I think that's what you're seeing right now at Asbury College. I think you see a generation that's desperate for something real, desperate for something that tangibly matters, desperate to know God. And I think the joy that's coming out of some of the old guard preachers that are watching this happen, seeing their history come back to life, is they're desperate for God to do it again because the church has died. And so I just feel like this is a moment in time where God's going to do a massive work. I think it's bigger than a movie. I think our movie gets to be a part of it. I think the movie's important. I think it's a story that's entertaining, and it's well worth seeing in the theaters. But it's a part of a larger tapestry of God just massively moving in a way we haven't seen in 50 years.
Absolutely.